Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we have several things to bring to you today, including the United States media and the statement that they're actually pulling the wool over a lot of people's eyes in regards to current events, as well as why a lot of people in Japan don't want U.S. soldiers there, and quite a few more articles that we're going to bring you today. But first, we're going to start off with an RT program with Peter Lavelle, and he was talking about the fact that there were several topics of discussions, the first being that the American press and how it manipulated and hid certain information from the American public regarding recent national and international events. Regarding the press, Patrick Lawrence, a foreign affairs columnist and author, said of the American press that the main device employed over and over was not outright deception, although one can find that, but rather that of omission. So leaving important details and facts out so that the public will be more informed and can make a decision based on that.
In regards to Ukraine, which has been a hot topic for some time, Mark Sloboda, an international affairs and security analyst, spoke about the NATO-trained battalion in operation in Ukraine and how one particular reporter who was in the midst of the troops there wrote about the whole ordeal as well as tweeted about his experience in Ukraine. But the point that was stressed was that it wasn't covered by the mainstream Western media, like you're saying, omission, leaving it out.
Right. In fact, the only news sources that covered it was International Business Times, which is a smaller news source, and Russian media. This, Mr. Sloboda said, is how your perception of reality is managed. He also referred to a UN report from the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture, which was also hidden from Western public.
In regards to Russia's take on the Syrian conflict, Dmitry Babich with Sputnik said Russia has to weigh all their options because it's a risky game, but al-Nusra and Islamic State used the ceasefire to build up their forces, and now they're advancing towards Aleppo. Well, Peter also brought up the topic about Washington asking Americans not to target al-Nusra. Mark Sloboda also chimed in, stating that President Obama has also asked Russia not to attack al-Nusra, which is in effect al-Qaeda in Syria.
Interesting. Sloboda also said that it is obvious that the U.S. can't be brought to peace through diplomacy, in this seeing that they continue to back their factions and because there's a type of power vacuum going on right now and everyone's jockeying for a position with the strategy of Assad must go and, of course, we must humiliate the Russians. So it's like there's never going to be a solution that they can agree on so that it's a win-win situation for everybody involved.
Dmitry Babich said, from a Russian point of view, Russia can't contain the United States alone, and we need support from countries in Europe and to mobilize the public opinion, which he said is what the Ukrainian crisis did. It really mobilized public opinion in Europe.
EU sanctions imposed on Russia with pressure from the U.S. is starting to become frustrating to many. Patrick Lawrence made that point that the frustrations of the Europeans can no longer be contained, and NATO is seeming to become unglued. Even with the United States controlling about 97% of the world's media, it seems as though they're still losing public opinion to the 3% that remains.
In regards to China, they concluded with the fact that Ashton has made the statement to China that you're either you're with us or you're against us. Now, the head of the staff of the Chinese army made a reply to Carter's remarks saying some people are building a Chinese wall in their own heads. Sloboda said that China is about to follow the U.S., Japan, and South Korea in establishing an air defense identification zone.
Mark Sloboda said that the U.S. is acting out of impotence, not of strength, because they can't stop China, and all they can do is provoke it in the necessity of doing something for their own political domestic base. And of course, this is a sign, he said, of weakness. And of course, if they do challenge this air defense identification zone, where they're going to end up spiraling down into violence.
Well, there's still more violence taking place overseas. Larry McGee has the details for us on Syria and a disturbing trend being exposed regarding the American military in Tokyo. Larry?
The prized Syrian city of Aleppo is still under siege, with al-Nusra mercenaries being identified as the culprits. Scores of civilians are believed to have been killed during the recent attacks, many of which have reportedly been launched against residential areas. Have a look at this footage from the field.
Allah!
Russian sources are reporting that 2,000 militants struck a Kurdish district in Aleppo, where rescue workers and volunteers then worked desperately to recover any survivors from the rubble. The total number of people killed by al-Nusra mercenaries in recent attacks is being recorded at 270. Analysts believe that the group is playing on a truce, which became active on the 24th of February, and that other factions have joined the militants in targeting civilians. The West maintains that groups such as Jaish al-Islam are moderate opposition forces and have requested that Russian military refrain from striking al-Nusra for fear that they may be hit. Moscow's position is that after having been given several months to do so, America has failed to separate U.S. loyalists such as Jaish from groups such as al-Nusra. And at this point, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says anyone remaining with the terrorists only have themselves to blame. Russia has also petitioned the UN to include factions such as Jaish al-Islam to the list of terrorist organizations, but the move has been blocked by the West. With fresh civilian blood on their hands, however, due to the activities of their moderate allies, America is struggling to justify its position, saying that in the end, it is simply difficult and challenging to get the groups to disentangle. Also caught up in the web of military mayhem and mischief, Japan is expressing outrage this week after a U.S. soldier confessed to killing a young Japanese woman. Japan's prime minister vowed to bring the tragedy to the attention of U.S. President Barack Obama at an upcoming meeting and says that he will demand that America introduce strict measures that will prevent something like this from taking place ever again. The current head of Japan is a strong advocate for the U.S. military presence in Japan, and this latest incident surfaces just as the debate is raging over the proposed relocation of a U.S. base in Japan. Due to ongoing abuses, Japanese residents would like to see the U.S. leave. Catherine Jane Fisher, a reported rape victim of a U.S. soldier who is now an activist for the cause of women's rights in Japan, was one of many who presented a list of crimes committed by U.S. soldiers to Japanese authorities. Ms. Fisher says these sorts of rapes and murders have been taking place for over 70 years. There is an initial report brought on the incident, but then after that, it disappears and no one hears of it. Her, she says, is the only case to be won in 15 years, and meanwhile, soldiers are reportedly raping babies, women, and men. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Boy, that's a shame with all that those people have already been through, to have a group of people who are supposed to be protecting and watching out. They're actually taking advantage of a lot of the people.
Right, making it worse.
Yeah, making it worse. I'm sure that's creating a lot of frustration. Well, as the Euro 2016 football tournament is about to begin, France is feeling bombarded with all kinds of problems. The country has received new terror warnings while at the same time is dealing with mass protests over government labor reforms. All this comes as heavy flooding has engulfed a large part of the region, causing up to €1 billion in damage. However, President Hollande continues to insist everything is under control.
Well, let's take a look at this short video clip showing some of these problems.
No doubt that the Euros are on a potential target list for Islamic State, for obvious reasons. The threat is high, I think.
We're making progress in finding a solution. Of course, the spectators will be able to move around freely.
All right, move on. Nothing to see here. Please disperse. Nothing to see here, please.
90,000 security operatives will be deployed. We need to take all necessary measures to ensure that Euro 2016 will be a success.
Looks like he's got his hands full, that's for sure. Meanwhile, another strike is planned to begin on the second day of the Euro 2016 by Air France pilots. The streets of Paris are already full of protesters who have come from all across the city and beyond to make their voices heard. There seems to be a determination to continue protests and not let up for the international tournament. In fact, Jeff, another national day of strikes is planned to begin within a little more than a week away. So they're continuing to show their protest against the government.
Well, the weather has not been on the Euro 2016 side either. The devastation of the Seine River flooding its banks has brought an added physical and financial burden to the country. The government declared the flood a national disaster. Prime Minister Manuel Valls said the country has an emergency fund available to those now homeless after torrential rains have caused the worst flooding seen in decades. Valls added, while a full assessment of the damage has not yet been made, insurance companies and government officials have been offering estimates.
Oh, that's insane. On the 25th of April, U.S. President Barack Obama announced he would be sending 250 additional American troops to Syria, while the president repeatedly pledged not to put more boots on the ground in the recent past. The administration seems to deny that this is the case.
Well, take a listen what the administration was saying within the last year and a half regarding these no boots on the ground.
And there was never this, there was never this no boots on the ground. I don't know where this keeps coming from.
I will not put American boots on the ground in Syria. We should not be drawn once more into a long and costly ground war. It will not involve American combat troops fighting on foreign soil.
The resolution we've submitted today does not call for the deployment of U.S. ground combat forces to Iraq or Syria.
No boots on the ground. Well, the government also denies these troops will be involved in combat missions, although the possibility to be drawn into fighting is always there. At a recent State Department briefing, journalists tried to get an explanation as to what the American boots will be doing on the ground in Syria.
State Department spokesman John Kirby apparently has never heard President Obama say no boots on the ground in Syria. But members of the press in attendance collectively challenged that notion.
Well, Associate Press journalist Matthew Lee went back and forth arguing with Mr. Kirby that the statement had been made. All options are on the table except boots on the ground. To this, Mr. Kirby simply replied, "I never said that." But remember, Jeff, we just saw the president make those statements himself. Upon more pressure from the press, John Kirby then said, "Special forces are not ground troops, although they will be on the ground."
Well, RT's Gianna Chichikan then tried to get clarification, asking, could the president send any number of special forces without calling them ground troops. Mr. Kirby basically said they weren't conventional ground troops and were not being sent in to conduct combat missions, but to advise and assist. Now, while it seems that these troops could easily be engaged in fighting while in Syria, Mr. Kirby ended the briefing with this statement: "There's no point in arguing the boots on the ground rhetoric. I'm not disputing the fact that we have troops on the ground and they're wearing boots."
Well, Press TV interviewed author and historian Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley concerning what is going on in Syria. Dr. Tarpley said it's a matter of carrying out orders from various groups and nations such as NATO. They are the underlying reason for the upheaval in Syria.
Dr. Tarpley stated they're carrying out their orders. The orders coming from NATO, from Hillary Clinton, from Haig, Faboose, and the rest of them are don't have a deal. NATO doesn't want a peaceful solution of the international problems in Syria. That's what he said, Katan, that NATO, that's right, NATO doesn't want a peaceful solution of the international problems of Syria. They want the issue kept alive. They want continuing violence.
That's odd. Well, he added continuing civil wars so that they can use it eventually, so that if the condition is obtained, they can use it for an aggression, for a coalition of the willing, an armed attack, a no-fly zone followed by a regime change. That is the goal, Tarpley says. So there's no surprise the Syrian National Council carries out the orders of the group that is paying them, the group that's paying them. They're a group of foreign puppets who've been dedicated to aggression.
Well, Syria isn't the only Middle Eastern country the U.S. is still involving itself in. It's the 13th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, and U.S. troops are still there and still sending more resources. In the name of fighting the war on ISIS, defense officials have sent a group of Marines to Iraq. The group will support troops already there, while President Obama early on warned repeatedly against getting drawn into a costly ground war in the Middle East. It fell on deaf ears.
Interesting. On the Senate floor, there has been little debate about the situation, but we can look back to see Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia at the time, which was around March 2003, speaking out against the war from the very beginning.
Senator Byrd said at that time, "The case that this administration tries to make to justify its fixation with war is tainted by charges of falsified documents and circumstantial evidence. We cannot convince the world of the necessity of this war for one simple reason. This is not a war of necessity, but a war of choice." Now, he continued, "There is no credible information to connect Saddam Hussein to 9/11, at least up to this point."
Interesting. For some strange reason, Jeff, Senator Byrd's position wasn't found on many front pages of editorial newspapers.
So, like you mentioned earlier, we'll just leave that out.
That's right. It's omission there. Today, President Obama admits that there is a problem, and no governmental bodies deny that. The next clip actually shows the president's plea for everyone to do more.
I want us to be clear. We are not moving fast enough. We are not doing enough. Everybody here has to do more. So everybody can do something. That's why we're here today.
Well, encouraging everyone to do more is a great start, but first, everyone must know what they can do. We've already tried stealing land, taking resources, bombing the hell out of people. These ways simply won't and will never work. The only way we are going to find a solution to our problems today is by going back to the way of life that was rejected over 6,000 years ago. Treating others the way you would like to be treated, showing respect, being honest, these type of principles have never brought harm to anyone. Each week, Yeshua Hawkins and his trained teachers bring lessons on the laws of morality that will truly stop today's problems. The teaching is enlightening and the methods are inspiring. Tune in to Yeshua Hawkins and his team every Saturday morning by going to Yahweh.com so you can learn just what exactly you can do to help.
You can contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copies of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisroelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com, or visit www.ypnnews.com. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com, and all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And also, don't forget, for the most informative and best resource on the internet for Bible study, go to www.yisroelsays.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisroel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.